Hi everyone, welcome back. Welcome to World Affairs in Context. If you're new here, do me a favor now and take a second to follow the podcast at worldaffairsandcontext.com. You will see additional content there that you might be interested in. And as always, I will include that link in the description below. So as European car makers are facing likely the most challenging times in decades, I think you would agree, they increasingly choose to invest in China. It is a surprise. Of course, the mainstream media in the West will remain silent because that goes against the narrative and it is a taboo to discuss this sort of thing. Policymakers said it is time to decouple from China no matter what. Well, in fact, decoupling, or as the new trendy word suggests, de-risking, has become an EU policy. But reality bites, and it has proven to be a lot different from that wishful thinking that is shared by the majority of EU politicians. Despite the EU Parliament's calls to decrease reliance on goods, materials, and resources that originate in China, European automakers appear to choose sound business decisions. At least they're making an attempt, despite the fact that EU adopts these policies to their own detriment. But they appear to choose sound business decisions, sound business practices over political fantasies. The most recent report, which I, by the way, discussed over the weekend in my weekly recap post that you can catch every weekend at worldaffairsandcontext.com, shows that European so-called greenfield investments, and those are investments that are made to establish a new company or to build a new facility, they have soared to record $3.9 billion as of June, the end of the second quarter of this year, the latest data available. A report that was published by the Rhodium Group consultancy shows that Q2 2024 registered the highest quarterly level of greenfield investments coming from the EU to China. And this is, of course, the highest level on record since 2022. German companies accounted for 57% of the total EU greenfield investments in China over the first half of this year. Among those top investors are such companies as Volkswagen, BMW, and chemicals giant BASF, and Sweden's Inca Group, which owns furniture retailer IKEA. So what is going on here, and why are European companies who are, to put it mildly, are not doing very well in Europe? As you know, Volkswagen just announced that they're closing 3 factories and also announced thousands of layoffs. So why are these companies invest in building businesses and building infrastructure in China? According to Rhodium Group, the answer to that question is fairly simple. They want to protect their Chinese supply chains, their cost-effective supply chains, from out-of-control European policymakers who force them effectively to act against their best business interests and, more importantly, against the interest of their own consumers. So once these companies invest in infrastructure that they technically own in China, they will be able to safeguard their own supply chains, and they will be able to guarantee that technically they're not sourcing anything from China, but from their own supply chains, from their own vertically integrated companies, therefore ensuring consistent flow of cost-effective materials to their assembly lines. By the way, the International Monetary Fund here forecasts emerging economies to grow at an average rate of 5%, which is really good in these current circumstances, while US growth is expected to be around 2.2% to 2.8%, nearly half the growth of emerging markets, and the euro area growth is even lower than that. It ranges from 0.8% for 2024 and nearly 1.2% the following year. So tensions and trade wars, as you can see, are heating up between the EU leadership and China. Last week, the European Union imposed 45% tariffs on Chinese EVs in an attempt to counter China's so-called, quote, overcapacity, and the new word that the EU Parliament loves to use is harmful subsidies, using EU's terminology. Well, within the European Union, Hungary and Germany actually opposed these tariffs, but their opposition didn't go far and their voices didn't make a difference. In response to EV tariffs that were just introduced by the European Union, China announced that it will impose anti-dumping measures on EU spirits imports and also launched investigations into EU pork and dairy imports. So as we can see, trade wars are heating up, and this is just going to hurt the ultimate consumer. Those people who are just barely making ends meet and who are really struggling to pay their bills because tariffs and any other protectionist measures, as I discussed at great length here on my channel over the past probably several years, protectionist measures hurt consumers and businesses. They're not going to make anything better. This is only going to further cause hardship for consumers in Europe. Financial Times reports that an EU official admitted that introducing new tariffs would actually result in higher retail prices. However, they insisted that it would be just fine, and they stated that it wouldn't be immediate, so don't worry, it's not going to be right away. They said if a consumer buys a car now, there is a very good chance that they will buy it from stock already available in the EU market. In response to these new tariffs that are not quite as high as those that were imposed by the Biden administration on Chinese EVs, 100% tariffs, as you know, China also said that it is still hopeful that the dispute would be resolved. During the meeting with a Czech delegation in Beijing, Lin Ji, a vice commerce minister of China, said that China seeks to expand bilateral relations, including trade, including investments and new energy, and expand the import of high-tech products and equipment from the Czech Republic to China. They also said that China hopes the EU will reconsider its newly imposed 45% tariff on EVs manufactured in China, and they called on the Czech delegation to try to make things better to settle the dispute. However, China is not just hopeful, but already said that it is entertaining an idea to raise existing tariffs on large engine cars to 25% from 15% currently. So as we can see, things are just escalating, and there appears to be no end in sight to these escalations, to these trade wars. There's no common sense whatsoever. As you can see, European policymakers are very far removed from the interest of their own constituents, from the interest of their own business owners and consumers. It is not surprising that their economic growth is expected to fall behind, therefore, and it will be trailing behind the economic growth of the United States and countries of the global South. It is important to limit dependency on those parties who may not have your best interest in mind. It is true. But in the case with Brussels-Beijing tensions, it is quite clear that European automakers simply cannot outcompete their Chinese counterparts. And while Germany has been China's top trading partner for more than a decade, EU policymakers seem to misunderstand the fact that business and economics it doesn't really work the same way that politics does. You can't simply continue shooting yourself in the foot and hope that somehow you will remain, quote unquote, the garden. Those times are long gone, and it is quite clear to anyone who's following the developments of the past 3 years, at least 3 years, that things are changing very, very swiftly. The fact that European investments in China are surging, led primarily by EU's automakers, is an indicator of the growing tensions within the European Union itself and the dichotomy, if you will, between the reality and the failing policy of its leaders. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. As always, I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me for this quick video. Remember to show your support, like, subscribe, and share. For more content, check out my podcast at worldaffairsIncontext.com. You will find that linked in the description below, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Take care.